Evangelion's philosophy has shifted over the years. It is Hideaki Anno's personal expression of his battle with depression and internal conflict. But understanding how he shifted from such a bleak yet hopeful ending on End of Evangelion to a fairy tale happy ending in the Rebuild series can be a bit more difficult to wrap your head around. To understand what Hideaki Anno went through, and in turn what ideals and philosophies of life he's projected onto the Evangelion series, we have to look through the perspective of a 15-year-old boy facing existentialism, tasked with fighting kaiju in a massive mech suit. Evangelion's transforming philosophies around life and the universe are found within a struggling child. That is essential access to our journey to understand the philosophy behind Evangelion. From the beginning, it's clear that Shinji faces two main issues: loneliness and depression. These largely stem from his lack of parental figures, his mother, as we know, dying and merging into the EVA Unit 01, his father neglecting and deserting Shinji following his mother's passing, struggling with his own mental issues. The next 7 or so years of Shinji's life were spent living within his teacher's tiny apartment, trying his best to be invisible and not inconvenience him, which would eventually lead him to be shaped in the boy we meet in Neon Genesis Evangelion. But that is just the beginning. The horrors that happen over the course of Neon Genesis shape and tear apart Shinji time and time again. We see a boy overcome with emotional trauma descend into a darker mentality, and this descent follows Anno's own as well. As his own mental state worsened, so did Shinji's, the two tied, creator and creation. Shinji is forced to face his own problems as well as Anno's, that being a struggle of loneliness, individuality, freedom, love, and responsibility. Deeper than that, existence is even called into question. But Shinji's biggest hurdle, putting everything else aside, is his inability to love himself. He's too afraid to define his self, and so his identity and feelings of worth are found in others. His father's few kind words to him, Misato's care for him, Rei's compassion, Asuka's intimacy. One thing that Shinji has become sure of, however, is that his worth to others is defined by being a pilot. We see him time and time again when the role is called into question, when he considers deserting it. It's also a consideration of leaving behind his identity, going back to living in his teacher's apartment, back to being a shell that simply lives. Shinji's induction into Nerve reignited his sense of self once again. While it may be he's relying on others to define himself, it's still not something he can easily let go of, precisely why he chooses, after each time, to return. No matter the fear or trauma he faces at the organization, they are all better than his alternative, fading back away into a lonely state between existing and not existing. Anno likely felt something similar. It's not too uncommon to latch onto how others define you, leaving your identity and personal satisfaction in the hands of others. But this can be incredibly dangerous to yourself, as it brings instability. What happens when your reliance on others backfires? When there's times when you screw up, when the only love you can rely on is the one you have for yourself, yet you have none. You spiral, sinking deeper into a pool of anxiety, depression, and existential dread. For Shinji, this peaks at his murder of Kaoru. What little love or respect he had for himself is swept from under him. His attachment to the boy disregarded when he's told by those that supply him with personal meaning to kill him. It's a choice between his identity and the boy who loves him unconditionally. Afraid of what he may be if he didn't kill him. Afraid if he still would be loved and recognized by Misato, by his father Gendo, by Asuka. He goes through with it, but can't live with the weight of his actions. He tries to rationalize, but at some point he realizes the futility. He knows that what he did is irredeemable, and that no words can argue otherwise. He now mourns the loss of 2 friends, but he does not battle to continue living. He does not try to grieve. He's left unable to cope. He resorts to the boy he was before, one who simply exists, pushing aside his emotions, attempting to shelter himself from interacting with the world around him. But one thing that can't be shut off, that Shinji can't escape, is the cravings of the human body. Shinji's rock bottom wasn't the murder of his selfless friend. That comes in the hospital. This scene is often chalked up to the fact that Shinji masturbates to a comatose girl. And I'm not going to defend or condone what he did, but it's better to look at what drove Shinji to this point than to just comment on the deplorability of his action. We've established that his trauma has scarred him, and that his identity and love for himself is attached to others' perspective of it. But what's front and center here is a little more complex. Shinji, as we know before Neon Genesis, did his best to be invisible following his father's desertion of him. This very feeling leaks over into his life during the show, constantly rearing its ugly head at each event of trauma up until this very moment, when Shinji's depression worsens and he once again longs to not exist. He has fully succumbed to nihilism, to not be real, to not feel. But what still is present, what you can't get rid of no matter how low you sink, is those physical desires rooted within your vessel. Most of what we are complexity-wise is constructed from our minds, our thinking being. Our identities are defined by the logical systems that only humans seem to possess. But inside every living being is instinctual properties. Eating, drinking, sexual desire is another, and for a teenage boy, this desire can be hard to combat, especially when at such a low point. The issue is the more you cave to these desires, the more powerless you begin to feel. It's as if you have no say in your actions, you simply go through the motions just because you feel the urge. And so Shinji gives in, but immediately recognizes after that desire has been satisfied how terrible he's become. From a narrative perspective, this is all to bring Shinji to the brink, so we can watch a boy suffer from the lack of love and identity, a boy plagued with doubt, depression, and anxiety. What he did isn't defendable because Shinji doesn't even defend it himself. He hates who he's become, the murderer of a friend, a prisoner to his own body, an unreliable pilot. When Zeal raids nerves, Shinji doesn't react. He's sunk lower into nihilistic ideals, desiring freedom from this pain of emotion death can bring. He's not afraid of dying, yet he's too afraid to kill himself, so he waits for his judgment to pass. Yet it never does. It takes all of Misato to will Shinji into once more asserting himself in reality, sticking some piece of him into trying to live and not just be, and not giving up on what he's become just yet. But even this ounce of will he's found is broken down once he sees Asuka's mutilated unit being paraded by the vulture-like mass-produced units, launching him and us into the most existential point of Evangelion. The ideals within Evangelion aren't new. There's been concepts of one source point of our souls, collective unconsciousness, bodies being vessels, and a world without pain for centuries. Many religions have concepts such as these, but focusing on them would be missing the point of instrumentality. It isn't as much about these metaphysical possibilities as much as it's about the desire that these are real. Now, it may feel like we're focusing more on psychology than philosophy, but take note that these two concepts are very closely intertwined. Several characters have conflicting views and desires when it comes to death and the ever after, about what would be the perfect afterlife, about what life is worth. And no one's struggle with this is as conflicted and narrated as Shinji's. The final episodes of Neon Genesis and the end of EOE showing us two conflicting sides of him, both very real, but both very different. While one side of Shinji questions the balance between freedom and responsibility, between individuality and collective, the other Shinji denies himself the ability to reflect, pushing himself into a deeper, depressed state, pushing out others and wanting to disappear. Both of these identities of Shinji offer us something. The reflective Shinji has us question the perfect nature of freedom. Without any constraints, we're left uncertain of what to do. There's no guidance, yet with too much guidance, too much responsibility, we feel suffocated. Freedom offers exploration, but makes us feel uncomfortable, while restrictions give us that comfortability at the cost of exploration. When everything is possible, nothing is defined for you, not the ground we stand on, nor gravity, not even point of view. You're left with too many options, and you're uncertain of what you should do. It's a tipping scale. We need both, same as individuality. With it, we can be unique, different from others, but this comes at the cost of pain and loneliness. It isn't a given that we'll fit in, be liked by those around us. If we are one collective, a perfect functioning machine of a society, we wouldn't feel alone. We are part of something bigger than us. But this can cost us our uniqueness. We would have lost individuality. There's a yin and a yang, and it's likely this collective v individuality position is a comment on Japan's society, and the benefits and cons to their collective nature. It seems like a utopia to the outside eye. Things are efficient, effective, and functioning, but there are unseen costs to obtain this. People outside of society's norm feel ostracized, unwelcome. There is the benefit that Japan is not entirely 100% collective society. These people can still find others like themselves that would be considered abnormal, but it's more difficult than what it's like in the US. But coming from America, a heavily individualistic society, while we may have the benefit of largely unrestricted identities, that freedom has led many to be uncertain of who they are or could be. Somehow both lead to the same issue. Loneliness, brought upon by not fitting the box or being unsure how to define the box. And Shinji, and quite possibly Anno as well, are there. They don't know what defines them, and so they don't like themselves. They don't believe they have worth in the world, don't know how to find it. Life trauma leading them to believe this to be so. Yet they're both forced to recognize, Shinji through the collective unconscious, Ano through the help of a friend's outstretched hand, that they are here now, living, meaning that they have been chosen to be worthwhile enough to stand where they are, do what they're doing. Worth is not found nor gained. Worth is given to you at birth and present to death. You are here, so you matter. It doesn't matter where your road takes you. You were meant to live. It's okay for you to be you. And those words cause Shinji to reach his happy ending, but the other Shinji is faced with something darker. While the other may have been on an exploration of the self, defining his own reality and state of existence, the other Shinji is plagued by the constrictions of reality, just as Ano was making EOE. He wrote his happy ending for Shinji in Neon Genesis, but it wasn't what the fans wanted. They wanted darker, they wanted real, and Ano recognized the fairy tale nature of Shinji's first ending, and whether he liked it or not, this time he had to be realistic. But that doesn't mean he didn't give Shinji a hopeful, yet harrowing ending. This Shinji battles with his dislikes of himself in a more primal and distasteful way. He lashes out at the woman in his life that he loves. He lets his darkest, instinctual driven thoughts come out, thinking of them sexually shown by the lack of clothes covering their bodies here, and believing that they don't understand his problems, not recognizing that they have their own. The irony is there. He desires to be understood by others, but fails to understand those around him. He's too caught up in himself to realize that we all struggle. But after his ego collapses several times and strangling the girl that he has come to love, Shinji realizes that while this pain and hate he has for himself is an uncomfortable feeling, he doesn't necessarily want to get rid of it. Within human instrumentality, a place devoid of pain and suffering, Shinji finds himself feeling it's wrong, that the purpose of his life is to face the pain of negative emotions, to grow from them. The mental spirals he experiences is part of his journey, something he shouldn't shy away of, no matter how much it may hurt him. He calls himself back to earth, ending instrumentality for those who desire it, not too different than the idea that our souls, who we are, chose to attach to the vessels that are our bodies, that we chose to experience the lives we're living for the sake of the experience, to learn something, and die walking away with our newfound knowledge of what is life. Asuka too joins him, and in a symbolic way, Shinji once more chokes her, showing that he's still capable of the same heinous acts as before, that he may have changed, yet he still hasn't. He's still plagued by the same issues, ones that don't just snap away like Ano made it seem in NG. Shinji still must fight to become better, to be happier, just as Ano must have realized too as his depression comes and goes in waves. The illness isn't something that disappears forever. It looms in the back of our minds. What decides if it returns is how strong we stand against it. How do we come to terms with our past experiences? How do we stake ourselves here now, despite all the trauma we faced throughout our lives? Something that Ano explores by changing the philosophy and narrative, by rebuilding Evangelion. Shinji's story takes on a new identity. No longer is this a narrative spanning one lifetime, but brought in as the idea that Shinji has lived as the ego, the identity that is Shinji multiple times. The story of Evangelion playing out over lifetimes as Kaoru tries to lead him towards an ending that is truly happy. The Evangelion manga, Neon Genesis, End of Evangelion, dozens of other unexplored variations, all of these are considered canon. All are lifetimes that led to this one, hoping to bring a conclusive end to the series, something that seems to have weighed on Ano. Evangelion has become, especially in Japan, one of the largest and most popular anime. Ano has always been identified heavily with this show, and it's no surprise that this revisit to the series was once again meant to reflect Ano's own personal growth between the original and now. Shinji's story took on the ideals that Ano has grown into. That existential dread layered in NG still present, but not in the sense that there is no escape, because Shinji finds one. Facing the same level of trauma, if not more, throughout the movie series, Shinji once more finds himself at an all-time low. What snaps him out of it is not a conversation with the collective mind, but a battle with himself to overcome it, come to terms with reality, with what's happened to him and what he's done, in pursuit of a better future, of a better way. Ano gave Shinji the power to overcome on his own, without a higher power guiding him to the answer, likely after finding the same power within himself, and so Shinji changes his own ending. He brings a new, happy ending to all the characters by facing the one who hurt him the most, who led him down the rabbit hole of emotional trauma, his father. Gendo takes on a larger, more fleshed out role in Rebuild. He's still the same neglectful Pops, but his motives become clearer here than they were in EOE. We're made to feel sorry for him and to sympathize with what he's been through. And this is thanks to Shinji. Instead of running from his father, afraid of asking the question, "Do you love me or not?" Shinji confronts him. This confrontation forcing Gendo to confront his own emotions that have been pushed deep down. Like father, like son, Gendo struggles with pushing others away from him, but he also struggles with the inability to cope or face loneliness. We're told early in his life he spent his time merely existing, taking in knowledge from books, refusing to socialize with others. But Shinji's mother changed that. Losing her, though, caused him to break. The one who had opened his shell, who lowered his defenses, died, leaving him with a wave of emotions he's never had to face. The loneliness, the grief. Instead of holding close the one thing that is proof of the life of Shinji's mother, that being Shinji, he pushed him away. But through Shinji's help, Gendo realizes his errors and finds Shinji's mother at her son's side. He apologizes, moving out of Shinji's way as he brings a happy ending to the Evangelion universe. Their world resembles our own. It has struggles like we do, hard times, but through it all, there is still worth, meaning to that which might seem meaningless. It's all based on perspective. It may just take a shift like Anno's or Shinji's for you to realize that happy endings can be found anywhere. Evangelion was never a story commenting on the metaphysical religious ideals. The Christian, Jewish, and Buddhist concepts are just backdrop for the heart of the story. This isn't to say any of those are wrong or unimportant. It's just to say that in this story, they mean absolutely nothing. We have metaphysical concepts to the Evangelion universe, the doors of Guff, souls, rebirth, but the real philosophy of the story is about the self, about our purpose. We are born here to experience just as Shinji was, to pursue our own endings, ones that we may not know yet, to overcome the pain of emotions, of loneliness, feelings of purposelessness, to stake an identity for ourselves, but not lose sight of others, pursue freedoms, but recognize the benefits of responsibility and constraints. Our world may be wildly different from what theirs once was, but the takeaways apply perfectly to us. After all, the one who wrote it is one of us, a creator who struggled with establishing his own sense of self while battling his trauma. He found love for himself and the ability to fight his own battles through the guiding hand of others. And I hope that any of you struggling in this world have that. And if you don't have someone like that, let me be the one to tell you, you are worthwhile. It's okay to be you. No matter how bad it may be, you're still here. There's still something out there for you. You just may have not found it yet. You're just as important as anyone else in the big picture. You don't need someone else's permission, not even yourself, to continue living. You were born with worth, and you won't ever lose it. I apologize if this video wasn't as in-depth as you may have wanted, or if it wasn't the philosophical elements you wanted me to focus on. There's a lot of analysis out there on the metaphysics of Evangelion already, and I already also have another much longer, more in-depth explanation video already on Evangelion. So if you really want something that's deeper, go check that out. I felt I didn't do Shinji's internal journey justice there, so I wanted to dive a little deeper here. So until next time, remember that your own worth is equal to others. Jenna.